media capital of the world.
To participate in the general public comment period, please call now at 818-238-3335. For any scheduled public hearings, please call when prompted to speak if you want the comment to be part of the record. Members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes depending on the number of speakers.
Good evening. Welcome to a special meeting of the Burbank City Council, Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. Please join me for a moment of reflection. Take a pause. Thank you. Please rise for the pledge. Begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam City Clerk, please conduct the roll.
Councilmember Mullins?
Here.
Councilmember Perez? I understand she'll be coming a little later.
That is the word, yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Takahashi?
Present.
Vice Mayor Schultz?
Present.
And Mayor Anthony?
Here.
Thank you.
There will be one period of public comment during tonight's public hearing. Members of the public may comment in person or by telephone. You can call 818-238-3335. I wore a suit 14 hours yesterday, so I'm not wearing a suit today. I looked at it on the shelf and I said no.
Well, if you would have sent the memo, just saying.
It was a very emotional decision. I was mad at it.
But I'm here because I'm serious, so
Yes,
we're good, right?
This is the time and place for the hearing for public input regarding the content of draft maps and sequencing of elections to propose a districting plan for the city's potential transition to district-based city council elections. Before we begin, are there any disclosures related to this hearing from council? No? All right, and when Councilmember Perez arrives, she'll let us know if there's any as well. Madam City Clerk, have the notices as required by law been given?
Yes, they have.
All right, and do we have the complete file of exhibits, correspondence, emails, and other documents?
Yes, you do.
Has the city received any written communications on this matter, and have they been provided to all city council members?
Yes and yes.
All right, excellent. To start us off, Senior Assistant City Attorney Jill Vanderboort, will you please summarize the matter for us? Introduce the city's consultant. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. On January 24th, 2023, you'll recall that the council unanimously approved a resolution of intent to transition from our current at-large system of electing council members to a by-district system. This will be the council's third public hearing considering the many map submissions and neighborhood submissions and sequencing of elections. I did want to note that the council will need a final public hearing to adopt any ordinance that it introduces tonight. But meanwhile, I would like to introduce Doug Johnson from National Demographics Corporation. It's nice to see Doug again. He is a bipartisan, the president of a bipartisan organization that has helped many, many, many jurisdictions throughout the process to explore districting and redistricting. And he is here to provide an overview of the council's process thus far, as well as options for the council to consider tonight.
Thank you very much. Good to be back with you again. If we can pop the slides up there. I will note there are two pieces tonight to the agenda. One is to pick a map and election sequence, and then the other is a resolution about ranked choice voting. So both of those are part of this hearing and this action item.
It's on your computer, Doug.
Oh, you want me to do it from
You
here?
gotta sign in there.
Okay, there we go. That's right. Okay. So just as a reminder, we're in this three-phase process where step one is picking a map that would have 5 districts. The current charter language calls for 5 council members, so that's the phase we're in now. Once this is resolved, then we'll go into phase 2 of looking at alternative options for something that could go on the city charter in March. So if folks want to talk about 6 districts or anything like that, there would have to be a change to the charter. That'll be addressed in phase 2 after we get through this choice of a map. The other piece, obviously, ranked choice voting, there's been a lot of talk about. That was originally going to be a part of phase 2, but if the council adopts that resolution tonight, that'll kind of take that off the table and leave it as an expression where we wait for the county to make that a logistically possible solution, is the way to put it. Just as a quick reminder, the slide we always like to remind folks of, but the rules for how maps have to be chosen and how they're evaluated. Number one, we have federal laws, which are we must have an equal population in each district within a very small plus or minus range on that. We have to make sure that each map complies with the Federal Voting Rights Act and that we don't have any racial gerrymandering. So race can be a consideration, but not what the court calls the predominant consideration. Then we have the State Fair Maps Act, which you can see listed here in priority order. They are in priority order under the law, which is be contiguous, minimize the divisions of neighborhoods and communities of interest as much as possible, follow easily identifiable boundaries, and then try to be compact. Don't bypass one group of people to get to another group of people. Again, these are prioritized, so you can do that if it's to achieve a higher priority criterion. And then the state law also prohibits adopting a map that would favor or discriminate against a political party. So those are our requirements. If you have multiple maps that equally meet all those requirements, then the courts have approved as traditional redistricting principles things like considering future population growth and respecting the voters' choices, so choosing the map that would at least pair fewer council members than other maps would. Again, those last two are not requirements, they're simply things the courts have said you can consider if you wish to after meeting all those other criteria. So that's a lot of review of things we've covered many times now. Just as a refresher, kind of how we got here in terms of maps, Burbank residents really turned out. We got really good input, lots of creative maps. So we started with 27 maps drawn and submitted in the first round. Then when we got to the kind of the focus maps round, we had 13 new maps received at that point. So we've been through 39 maps to get to the point where we are tonight. And at the last council hearing where the council just considered this, we really narrowed down to map 130 with a couple of concerns about that. And so the maps we'll look at tonight are map 130, which is certainly still on the table. And then there were really 2 issues we ran into that that I wanted to present. And so we have 2 takes on each of those issues. So the goal, as I state here, was for map 130, but the kind of the airport district extended east of the freeway. And so the request was, could we pull that back, both taking into account the future growth and because that district was a little off of population amounts to begin with. So what I looked at was a couple of options, and I'll go through them as we go through here. If you look at this map, there are too many people east of the freeway in District 2, the light blue district in the top left. So if we just drop all that off and put it all into District 1 and use the freeway as a boundary, then we're not within the required population range. So there's really two ways of addressing that I came back with. One is pull it all the way back to the freeway, as was the goal, but then make up the population by pushing District 2 south. And you kind of rotate around, and I've got two maps that do that. The other option was just to bring District 2 as close to the freeway as we could without coming all the way across. And so obviously the second option has less impact on the other districts because we don't push down into 4 and 5. So that's why we have 5 maps today. There's the map 130, then there's 2 maps that pull 2 all the way across the freeway, and then there's 2 maps that don't move 4 and 5 and just move as much of 2 into 1 as we can. So let me walk through those, and you can see on these maps too that we now do have all those the individual developments with how many units are planned for each one, thanks to the city staff for putting that together on very short notice as well. So we have all that information. So Group 1, these are the 2 maps that pull District 2 completely west of the freeway. So I-5 becomes the boundary in the north. As you can see, that does impact District 2. As I mentioned, it's too short, so it does need to pick up population. So the southern border of District 2 shifts down to Chandler. There's a little bit over on the west edge where it doesn't go all the way down to Chandler just for population balancing. But that pushes 2 south into 4 and into 5. 4 in this map goes a little bit farther east now because it's got to make up that population itself. And then 5 goes across the freeway. You can see here where essentially we're switching where we cross the freeway. 130C, the third one here, and for those following the lettering, 130A is the original 130. I didn't want to have, so that's why they start with B and C. It's kind of a lose-lose whichever way I number them, but that's why these are B and C. So B I just mentioned. C is similar, except that 5, instead of pushing across the freeway into the more residential area down on the southern border, now in this case, it's a little bit of an odd shape, but 5 is really pushing into downtown. The southern border where 5 and the green 3 would meet is Magnolia. So we're getting essentially everything north of Magnolia would go in that option. So really 2 different ways to do that. Both, again, the population numbers don't work out, so we can't use I-5 the whole way, which would be the clearest and easiest boundary. But these are options if you wanted to shift that around if they made sense. Group 2, much simpler, smaller changes from map 130. So in neither D nor E does 4 or 5 change. 4 and 5 stay the same as they are in 130. In map 130D, it's just a minimal shift where we're just giving up as much as we can within that allowed population deviation, dropping 2 down to be at the low end of the population range because, as we can see on those numbers, it's going to have so much growth. Map 130E is similar. It moves 2 as much west as we can, but it shifts it. Instead of being in the more residential area a little bit farther up by 5, it shifts E down to really pick up the downtown area. And also, one thing to note in 130E, as part of the underpopulating that district, in this map, 130E picks up the development right on I-5. They're right at, it's at Burbank, or it comes across. So that would shift from 5 into District 2 in this map. I do want to note that. So that's why they get a little bit of blue on the west side of the freeway there, is to pick up that development across from the train station. So 4 options, really two different groups, and then small differences within each of the groups. So I got this slide so you can kind of have them all on the screen at once. The other issue, once you pick a map, is the election sequence. We do have the question of, because in all these maps, the sequence works out the same, but we do get a district that has council members who are up in both 2024 and 2026, which is why there are both alternative election sequences, where once you pick a map, then we have to decide which one, but which ones will be up when. But just to reinforce, the sequencing question is the same for all 5 maps. So whichever map you choose, you're going to have the same question. The other piece is, as I mentioned, this PowerPoint is obviously focused on the district selections, but also on the agenda is the resolution about ranked choice voting, where the city is simply expressing its desire to the county to ask the county to please make that capability available to cities, at which point then the cities would decide whether or not they want to switch to that system. So our goal tonight is to pick a map and election sequence, and if you're ready to introduce an ordinance, you can. If not, that can be left for a later meeting. And then to debate and act on the ranked choice voting resolution. Anything else to add, Jill?
I did want to add, just for the council's benefit and the benefit of the public, we got a notice from the California Supreme Court this morning that we expect a decision out of the Pico Neighborhood Association versus Santa Monica case tomorrow at 10 a.m. So we will have the benefit of perhaps the Supreme Court of California weighing in on the California Voting Rights Act issue out of Santa Monica.
We don't have a meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m., do we? Okay. All right. I'm just...
Only if you really want to
God,
wear your
why?
suit again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you. Great. Let's move forward. We'll open the public hearing now to any persons from the public who wish to speak on this matter. Each person may address the council for up to 3 minutes, and then afterwards we'll go to the phones and give those people some 3 minutes. I only got 2 cards. All right. First up, I have Laura Elliott, followed by David Donahue. And if you want to speak, you can fill out a salmon-colored card.
All right, honorable council members, you all have an important decision before you considering whether or not to adopt a district-based voting process for the people of Burbank. I urge you all, in the strongest terms possible, to reject adopting any version of district-based voting. Not only is the basis for this consideration bogus and completely unfounded by facts and a century of successful at-large voting practice, but it is and will be a failed approach for all of Burbank citizens. District-based voting and not working well were imposed in other Burbank comparable cities and is being legally challenged by other impacted jurisdictions. Adopting district-based voting will egregiously disenfranchise all of Burbank's voters, fracture long-established cohesive neighborhoods, and, for the most ironically, further diminish minority groups' collectively ability to elect representatives of their preference to the council. To the entire process of introducing and promoting this dramatic change in electoral protocol to the people of Burbank has been flawed, inadequate, and smacks of a well-orchestrated promotional propaganda campaign. Despite scheduling several public hearings on how to adopt preferred districting maps, the majority of the public remains uninformed of what district-based voting entails and how it will impact them. Taking away the voting rights for full council representation is anathema to American concepts of democracy. There have been no public hearing opportunities for an informed public to weigh in or whether or not the city should adopt district-based voting or join other municipalities battling this threat in court. You have been putting the cart before the horse. You have decided to start doing the mapping before you really actually helped the public notify. You have only about 30 or 39 maps out of 105 or 107,000 people in the city of Burbank. Atrocity. I want each and every one of you to see you will be all accountable for the future, for this community that we call Burbank, that's been well established and very ethnic oriented and has helped all parts of the people in this community. And you, sir, need to really reflect upon yourself and the integrity of what you have been doing to our city of Burbank. Thank you very much.
David Donahue, followed by Carmenita Helegar.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor Anthony, Vice Mayor Schultz, council members, and very talented staff. First, I want to commend the city for doing what they did to get the word out on districting. I want to thank Mr. McDougall's office for making his staff available to talk to me via Zoom, as well as the demographer. I think that whenever I asked a question, it was given an answer. When I pushed back to say I don't like it or understand it or feel that it's really kind of addressing the core of what I was questioning, they gave me more time, they gave me more context, and so I want to applaud those people for being part of it. I'm not 100% sold on the idea of districting, but I understand it. The city is being sued, and the city attorney has made it very clear that it could quite possibly cost the city millions and millions of dollars to litigate. So I understand you're in a very tough situation. Watching the demographer's presentation on the various alternative maps of 130, some of them are gerrymandered. I mean, it was very interesting to see the airport area kind of squeeze into some areas of the downtown and then squeeze the Rancho into the downtown area. I think the original configuration of 130 did a pretty clean job of it. I liked it. Where it takes the airport area and kind of pulls it down to Chandler, that's an interesting sort of, change. But again, avoiding those gerrymandered issues I think would be important as well. Lastly, I want to kind of comment on I don't want to call it the elephant in the room, but there's a few renters on our council. And being able to relocate into a district that may not have a council person, I think is a concern. Not that it would happen, not that anybody would do that. But I would say, and I believed it was stated that there would be a term that a council member would have to be residing in a district before they could run in that district. I would hope that that is put into any sort of ordinance. Thank you for your time last evening. Thank you very much for your time the week before, staying till 1:30. I do appreciate your service and your dedication to the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carmenita Heligar, followed by Olga Rodriguez.
Hi, council members Mullins, Takahashi, and our Vice Mayor Schultz, and our Mayor Anthony, and all of our staff. Sitting here, I have a question. So once we do the map and if we go to districts, my concern with this question is we're doing all of our strategic plans has been presented to us. And when we look over at the Golden State, there's a plan for over 6,000 units to be put in. So what is going to happen then? How is the demographics going to change? And are we going to have to do this all over again? Because we have, 12,000 units by whatever year, I think it's 28 or 30, like whatever year that is. But it's a real concern if we are already scheduling and planning 6,000 units by the airport. That's going to change all of our demographics over there. So I guess my question is, how is that going to affect our maps? Are we going to then have to divide up another district and redo this all over again once that process starts? And are there going to be triggers in there that if we get to this certain amount, then we have to redo it? Like, what can we do in the ordinance to be more proactive instead of reactive when this happens? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Olga Rodriguez, and that's my last speaker card.
Hi, my name's Olga Rodriguez. I am opposed to this district-based voting, and I'm a little confused because the gentleman before me mentioned that we were being sued. It is my understanding that is not a valid lawsuit, that it's not true, it's not existing. Are we being sued or not?
Well,
is there actually a lawsuit?
When you're done talking, we'll answer.
Is there actually a lawsuit?
You have a whole 3 minutes to ask all your questions.
Okay. The reasons that I'm opposed to this: district-based voting can lead to reduced representation for residents as it narrows the pool of candidates. Instead of considering the entire city, voters are now limited to choosing from candidates within their specific districts. This could potentially exclude well-qualified candidates who might be better suited to address the city's needs as a whole. There is a risk of gerrymandering, where district boundaries are drawn to favor a particular political party or group. This could result in unfair advantages for some, undermining the principle of equal representation. District-based voting can encourage city council members to focus primarily on their district concerns, potentially leading to fragmented decision-making. This could impede the city's ability to address border issues that affect all residents. With district-based voting, council members may prioritize their district's interest over cities as a whole. This could lead to lack of attention to the citywide initiatives and planning. Administratively complex and costly. This includes redrawing district boundaries, setting a separate campaign, and managing district-specific voting registrations. This could strain the city's resources. District council members compete for limited resources and prioritize their constituted interest. Some argue that district-based voting can make it harder to hold council members accountable because they can primarily be responsible to their district constitution rather than the entire city. Voters might make it less efficient to address citywide issues that require unified approach, such as infrastructure, transportation, and economic transportation. So that is all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I see one more speaker card coming. Just made it under the wire. All right. Louis Altobelli.
Yes, of the Rancho.
Yes.
Live in the Rancho. Council, first of all, every time I've spoken to this issue, I've been against it. I don't like it. The previous speakers brought up all the issues that I would have argued. I could see from the very first meeting, I saw which way this train was running. It didn't matter how perfectly logical the argument may have been. This thing was going in one direction, districts, and there's no one person was going to be able to stop this. It would take all 5 of you. But I do want to address an additional issue. We're going to be dealing with the mayor issue as well after this is handled. And this mayor at large that is discussed, that may not even be constitutional to have a mayor at large and then have these 2 positions stay, the city manager and the city attorney. Once you have a mayor that's been elected by all the people, you now have a mayor's office, a scope of authority. You can't have someone out in the wilderness just hanging out and these 2 positions stay. What's going to happen is these 2 positions will now work under the auspices of the mayor's office. If I'm now the elected mayor, they work for me. That's the way it worked. Now, that's Austin, Texas had our same setup here. That's what happened. They ended up with a full-blown chief executive mayor. City manager was appointed by the mayor, by the way. So therefore, if the mayor is voted in with agenda, I can't have someone here that's opposing that agenda. So these 2 positions have a conflict of interest. They have an interest in the outcome. These 2 positions, they've worked hard their entire careers. These are important positions. Well, now they work for me. Okay, and they work on behalf of the mayor's office. I'm saying they work for me if I was the mayor. So, and the rest of the council, you can get some advice and consent for these, but these people are always coming from the mayor's office. You need to get a constitutionalist. I don't think a properly constituted representative government, which is what we have. We don't have a democracy. It's a representative government. It has to have a certain authority. They're set up in certain specific ways. And when it comes to the mayor, these 2 positions need to recuse themselves because they have an interest in the outcome. They want to keep their jobs. They don't want to work for me as the new mayor. So this is really critical. Constitutional attorney in here, and these 2 can't be a part of the conversation at all. They need to recuse themselves. It would be completely unfair. Anyway, wow, 13 seconds left. We need to define emergency powers too for the mayor. So when that comes up, and how long those emergency powers last, maybe they last for 30 days. After that, then the council has to continue with those emergency powers.
Thank you, Mr. Altobelli.
We'll discuss that
Your
more in
time's
detail.
expired.
I think I made
Thank
an
you.
important point here.
Thank you, appreciate it. Do we have any callers on the line?
We do.
Okay, great.
Our first caller is Dominic Moonhart.
Dominic, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Anthony. I just wanted to call on here to give my opinion on districting. I understand some of the city council members were talking about how 5 districts can't really have a minority-majority district. I know there's a lawsuit going on in Santa Monica, as has been said before. So I honestly believe that we should have 6 districts in Burbank with an at-large mayor, because I used the Dave's redistricting map and put 6 districts in, and I was able to generate a minority-majority district for Burbank. So if you guys could consider that. I believe I also sent an email to the city clerk and the council members with my map and my staff, and the majority for that minority-majority district would be the Hispanic population. So if you guys would consider doing a charter amendment to have 7 council members and have a minority-majority district to address the minority concerns, minority voter concerns. So with that, thank you very much, and I will yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next caller is Steve Chesson.
Steve, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Steve Chesson, and I'm President of Californians for Electoral Reform. I strongly urge you to adopt the resolution concerning ranked choice voting that is an attachment 2 to this agenda item. The Los Angeles County Registrar Recorder has made it clear that without a formal expression of interest by the City of Burbank, he will make no attempt to implement ranked choice voting. I note that the resolution does not bind the City of Burbank to adopt ranked choice voting, so there is no downside in passing it. If and when the registrar implements ranked choice voting, the City Council can then consider whether to adopt it. But without such a formal declaration of interest, you will never be able to have that discussion. Of course, the registrar will probably come back and ask you what kind of ranked choice voting you want him to implement, or with some other reason to delay a response. If that happens, my organization will be happy to help you craft an appropriate response that will leave the registrar with little wiggle room in responding to your request. I will send you my contact information via email. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next caller is Debbie Dick.
Debbie, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. I just had 2 quick questions. From the opening remarks at the beginning of the meeting, am I given to understand that the City of Santa Monica is in fact challenging the CVRA ruling, and I assume there's some decision expected tomorrow? So if the decision goes for Santa Monica, are we automatically also going to be challenging that? And my other question, and it's probably been addressed, and I apologize if I've overlooked it, in the event that no one chooses to run in a district, what happens then? Quick question. I'm sorry this is happening. I understand why it's happening. I've lived here since 1960, and our at-large has worked so well for so long, and everyone seems well represented, but we have to do what we have to do. So I understand, and I thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We're just waiting to reconnect with the last, one more caller.
Our next caller is Diana.
Diana, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm calling in because, unfortunately, I couldn't make it there. I didn't hear the beginning of the meeting, and I don't know why Nikki Perez is not there. But I want you all to look at your audience. There's a lot of empty chairs there. This just goes to show, again, why this districting topic is a failure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Continue.
Oh, okay. Okay. So there's no one in your audience, and I'm a little upset. When I was doing my maps, I reached out to Nikki Perez, and she agreed to meet with me and then never reached me again. And I have a busy life myself. I don't approve of this. This map that you have is very typical. I actually even drew one that was close to it. However, my concern is that if we should go with this districting, each of these district representatives need to be handling all levels of the economy in Burbank. This breaking up of districts starts to split up the community. You see it in Glendale. You see it in the neighboring communities, Pasadena. It's a big trouble coming. And I'm disappointed, Mayor, in the fact that you are not focusing on Burbank. Everything I see you post is regarding other issues. I want to hear about housing. You know what? I want one of those townhomes that they're breaking up the bowling alley for. Make sure I get one. You guys are not focusing on Burbank, and that's what's upsetting me because I voted for you guys, and I'm disappointed in all of you. Well, except maybe Nick Schultz, because he's the only one who ever responds. So please do your job. I yield my time, and I'm not for this districting until it's done right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are just checking. We have no more callers.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I'm being told we have one more coming
One more
in.
call.
They dropped the call.
Okay. I didn't want to welcome our city attorney, Mr. John McDougall, has joined the meeting. Do you have any response? There's a couple of legal questions that were asked.
Yes. So I'll respond to Ms. Helliger first. She asked about the population growth that is likely to happen when we finish our specific plan efforts. Her question was specifically about the Golden State area, which aligns with proposed District 2. We also have the Downtown Burbank Transit-Oriented Development specific plan, which covers the western half of District 1 and District 3. There is also a Media District specific plan, which covers the southern half of District 4 and at least the studio portion of District 5. And council has given staff direction to initiate a Rancho specific plan, which would cover the remaining southern half of District 5. So it's true that any growth projections that come out, which are largely at this point driven by the housing element, would increase growth in each of these districts. As I indicated, though, the specific plans affect all of the districts in one way or another, and the process for readjusting the districts is after each census. So there's currently a pipeline of projects which have already been approved by the council, some of which are under development, some of which are not under development. Those would be the first ones that would affect districts. And the first time that population growth would impact the districts would be when the census is done in 2030. So in 2031, we'd be looking at those numbers, and there would be a redistricting process that would be done in compliance with the statute. And so each 10 years, as the population changes, all of these districts must be re-examined by law. So that would be the natural process to account for population growth, whether it comes from areas within specific plans or without the specific plans. So there's a process. The next speaker asked about the lawsuit. A draft lawsuit was given to the city with the threat of litigation. It met the initial statutory threshold for a claim under the California Voting Rights Act. There's one party that met the requirements for the initial claim. We passed all of the timelines to complete the process. They have a right to challenge us under the CVRA now, and they've already given us a preview of what that lawsuit looks like. It's actually attached as an exhibit to, I think it's the March, no one's going to know off the top of their head, but I think it might be the March 14th council staff report. We attached those materials from the perspective or potential plaintiff that actually submitted the threat to sue under the California Voting Rights Act.
Before you continue, Madam City Clerk, please let the record reflect Councilmember Perez has arrived at the meeting. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Altobelli's theories about what officials the city manager and city attorney would be accountable to. He shared those with me in one of our community workshops. However, they're theories because the charter specifically says, Charter Section 315 says, there shall be a city manager appointed by the city council. And Charter Section 320 says there shall be a city attorney appointed by the city council, and nothing in this districting process changes those provisions of the charter unless the council chooses to change those provisions of the charter, or unless there's some other charter effort which gains enough signatures to then put a measure on the charter to change both Charter Section 315 or Charter Section 320, which the council or the community could do, but as it's presently worded, the charter is the supreme law governing the city, except where preempted by state law, and so that is the effect. Nothing about Now, an at-large mayor can't be created as a position without a charter amendment. So that certainly could all be examined, but until there's a charter amendment with charter language, these are the provisions that would control.
And just real quick as a follow-up, under state law, switching from a rotating mayor to an at-large mayor doesn't change the definition of mayor or change the powers of mayor, doesn't give them more authority?
Well, the powers of mayor would change because our charter specifies that one of you shall be the mayor and that it's a ceremonial role. It specifies other duties like shall preside over disasters except where delegated in the code. All of that will change once we change if the council or the community through the charter separates the mayor as a position different from the council. If the council were to take action to introduce an ordinance and subsequently adopt that ordinance, this ordinance that's before you or something similar to it, the mayor would be selected the same way. So a charter amendment would have to happen first. And in that charter amendment, because the mayor wouldn't be necessarily part of the sitting council, that would be an issue that would have to be deliberated and specified in that proposed charter amendment.
And just a quick follow-up to that, any charter amendment goes through a very specific charter review process.
No, the council can adopt an ordinance putting a measure on the ballot for a charter amendment. It's then a ballot measure which requires an impartial analysis and arguments for and against the measure, and we have to meet timelines to get it to the county, to get it on the on a statewide election. There are two opportunities coming, March 2024, November 2024, and so.
Okay.
They could, but none of that's been determined. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Real quick to add one thing, that there's probably, I would say at least 100 cities in the state that have a citywide elected mayor. Less than 10 of them are the strong mayor that we're talking about, where the mayor controls everything.
Right.
So there are lots of cities that have a council member who's essentially just another member of the council.
Sure.
And I encourage you to ask Mr. Johnson further questions about that, because he has way more experience in working in those cities.
Okay, but either way, that's not on the agenda today. Correct. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask questions. The speaker
Sure,
brought
sure.
it up. So the final comment was the call-in speaker asked about the Santa Monica case. As was noted earlier in the meeting, the Supreme Court has given notice that that opinion is to be released tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We don't know what it says. Once we know what it says, we will be able to determine what impact it has on Burbank. However, the caller asked whether the city would also challenge, and actually the Santa Monica case would resolve questions Burbank has about the California Voting Rights Act. Their issues are similar to Burbank's issues, and so this decision will either resolve any question or create more questions, because the decision could actually set out a multi-part test for how issues of influence and majority minority and each of those things are handled by cities.
I think one of the key points of the caller's question was whether or not we would automatically, or if we are legally bound and tied to the Santa Monica case. Whatever happens tomorrow, it doesn't immediately affect what we're doing. We still have to analyze it, see if it applies to us, review that case. Like, it's not automatically going to trigger a change in what we're doing, is what I'm asking.
We will evaluate it and come back to the council with our understanding of the city's obligations.
Okay, great. Thank you. If you've got a follow-up.
Yeah, I've got a follow-up for one of the responses you had, Mr. City Attorney, regarding the additional impact of additional units and increased populations in different districts. So I noticed on the presentation that each of the sample maps had numbers in each of the districts, and I believe those numbers represent additional projected population. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Could you speak to, it looks to me like they're pretty spread out and that the impact would be not even, but it wouldn't probably expand or go beyond the threshold of the differences between the districts for quite a while. Is that the impression that you get as well looking at the numbers? Because it has to be a certain percentage of difference when you initially make the districts, right, between the populations. And I think what our speaker was talking about was, will that make it so that they will go outside of those bounds of the percentages that have to be between districts?
So, yes, I mean, there's a lot of factors about when it gets built, how many
Yeah.
people move into each unit, that kind of thing. And the key thing is that this is an optional thing that you can do if you think it's a good idea, is underpopulate. There's no requirement to do it.
Yeah.
The courts recognize that populations are going to change. You know, we do, I think I mentioned, we do Surprise, Arizona, and they used to double the city's population every 5 years. You know, and the courts didn't make them redraw every 2 years because they recognize that. The only requirement is to redraw after the census, regardless of the different rates. So when we're looking at these numbers and we're estimating, that's just because we think it's a good idea to try to do it. There's no like, oh, you did it wrong, we have to redraw.
Right. But there's no obvious, if you look at it, there's no obvious huge jump of percentages comparatively to each other in the numbers that have been presented so far that you're aware of, or like
Right. I mean, there's more numbers in District 2,
Yeah.
mainly because there's not a ton more dots, but the dots have larger numbers associated with them.
Right.
But some of the big ones are like the Play
862,
Castle, whatever that
yeah.
place is, and that's more longer term speculation about numbers than some of the more concrete short term ones.
Okay.
So it's all in the right ballpark, which is fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I wanted to respond to some of the things said. First off, Ms. Elliott, I got to be honest with you. There is nothing that you said that I don't agree with. I think you are spot on. I think there could have been more outreach. I think this is on a rush timeline, and we didn't get enough people in the room. And I think that we're being forced to do this in a way that none of us would have wanted to do it. And I do believe that it does fundamentally shift Burbank politics. Forever, permanently. I absolutely agree with you. There's not a single person on this dais right now, and I know because I saw all their campaign literature. Nobody canvassed, nobody knocked doors, nobody campaigned on districts. None of us. Yet, we're being forced to take this on. I don't like it. I would not have chosen this to spend 6 months plus on this issue. It's just, and you're right, there's money involved. It's a problem. It's a problem, and we're trying to do the best we can. We're listening to the advice of our attorney. We're listening to the advice of staff. We're listening to other cities who have gone through this, both fought it and didn't. And it's hard. It's hard. So we're trying to do this as best we can. We're all having a hard time. We're all having a hard time. We'll go through it. My only question left. One of the speakers mentioned length of stay. I know currently in our city code, you have to live in the district 30 days before you can file to run, 29 days before you can file to run.
29 days, Mayor.
So if that were to change, can that change by ordinance? Would that have to go to city charter? Is that something the city clerk brings forth?
So we will be bringing, provided council introduces the ordinance transitioning to 5 districts, we will bring a cleanup ordinance changing the provisions in the code which have citywide at-large residency requirements and making them district-specific, because there's no reference to districts. It's a separate discussion related to this, but we really didn't think we'd have enough time tonight, and they're different. These concepts and the code amendment is not needed if we don't have votes to introduce a map. So if the map's introduced, we'll bring an ordinance, and our plan as of today is to bring an ordinance introducing changes to the municipal code regarding election procedures and residency. And then both ordinances, provided the city's obligations remain the same, both ordinances would come together for adoption, likely the end of September, depending upon the city's obligations under the law.
Does the city council at that time have an option to extend that number from 29 to 45, 60 days of residency? Do we have that ability, or is that a state law? Talk to me.
You probably need to get specialist attorney reference on this, but a number of the longer extensions have been struck down as unconstitutional. So I don't know which ones have been struck down.
Like how long? Like 6 months? I don't want to, that's impossible.
May I, Mr. Mayor, I think we need to take a look at the election laws, because I think it might be in the election law, and I'm sure the city clerk is looking into it. It's not just applying to the city of Burbank.
I would also say that this is why we're bringing that as a separate ordinance,
Okay.
because that's really not the topic of the five districts.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll pull that back.
And Ms. Leone, who's your expert counsel on this, she will know that off the top of her head.
Oh, okay, great.
And she will be here when we discuss that ordinance.
Awesome. Okay. Excellent. Any other response to public comment? Yep.
Yeah, I do. I do want to address the speakers, and thank you for, of course, being here on a Wednesday afternoon. And I want to echo what the mayor said, and I want you to hear it from me. And I said it in every meeting that we've had regarding the districts. I am not in favor of districts. I do not want districts in the city of Burbank. And it's not something I look forward to having in the city of Burbank. And I pray that tomorrow Santa Monica actually prevail and win their lawsuit so they don't have to go to district, because that would make our life a lot easier, hopefully after the city attorney gives us the news that it will. But we're here today. We have to continue doing the work with the assumption maybe that we are going to go to districts. And I do want to address also the issue over that we didn't have enough outreach. I do have to defend staff, that the city has been doing a lot of outreach. There's yard signs everywhere if you drive around the city. They're very small, and I get it, and I know it could be a lot bigger. There is a lot of information on the website. There's been a lot of information sent around. Could we have done a lot more? Yes. The issue is, and as the former city clerk, I struggled with that, even letting people know there is an election and you need to go out and vote. Even when the ballot was sent to their house, it's still people's lives are busy. They're not focused so much on what's happening until things really come to, close up, that we need to make a decision. I wish this was packed like it was last night. I really do. But it's not, and we have to continue with our business. We instructed staff to go out and do specific marketing. I believe they did the best they can. We put it everywhere that we can possibly can, unless we go and knock on every door to make sure people hear us and know what's going on. I want their input. I want them to be having a say in the process. And as far as I'm concerned, and I know we're not there yet, I'm going to share with you at the time when we try to finalize and make a decision on this, to how I want to proceed with, in the event that we have to go to districts, how we get there. So with that, I want to also address the issue over having 6 districts, an elected mayor. That, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, is not on the table right now. It's something that we need to seriously take a look at if this is what we want for our city. And I am not going to make that decision for our residents. This is something that will go out to the voters, and they need to have a say on what happens. I cannot make that decision, nor that I'm going to vote on it, because the voters needs to decide how many districts do we need to have, and if you want to have an elected mayor or not. It will change our city forever. We think districts are an issue, but adding more council members, adding an elected mayor, it's even, you think that districts are bad. That's going to be even a lot more to worry about, and I encourage all of you to start talking about it now. So I hope that really addressed some of the concerns. I know the city attorney answered some of the questions. Some of the callers, ranked choice voting, I believe we talked about this. And I'm not going to make an assumption that the County of Los Angeles is actually going to change for the city of Burbank until I see an official letter from the county telling us they're going to do it. I know it keeps on coming up over and over in every meeting. It's not that we don't want to. The County of Los Angeles, and I've dealt with this for years, they said no. Unless I get a letter to City Council saying, yes, we will do it, then I'm happy to talk about it at this chamber. Otherwise, I'm not even looking at it as a consideration right now. Thank you.
Just a quick reply. I think you're right. Staff did an excellent job with the time they were given. And I think that's my main concern. There wasn't enough time. We didn't have enough but yes, I think staff has stepped up in the small window that is available.
If I may add to that, Mr. Mayor, our PIO, Jonathan Jones, at one of the meetings listed off every single thing that the PIO office did to get the word out. And I have to say that everything on his list were things that I had heard the community ask for. I don't know if there is something that we could have done better. I would love to hear your thoughts, because at the time we did solicit ideas, and I felt like the PIO was very responsive to doing every single thing that the community asked for. So if we did a miss, I think that wasn't because of lack of effort or lack of even time, I think, because I think considering the time, I mean, it was, whether there had been, an extra year or not, they did everything they could. Maybe lack of ideas, but for the future, for this kind of item, if there's something else we could have done to get the word out for something like this, please share to us where else we could inform you, so that we can add it to the very long list that the PIO already has for getting the word out for things like this.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here with all of you today, and I'm so sorry to the public and my colleagues for missing the first part of the meeting, but as you all are well aware, I do work a 9-to-5 job. I got here right as fast as I could after work, as traffic allowed from Van Nuys, and, I did let my colleagues and staff know that I'd be running late due to work. I'm really grateful for all the thoughtful comments and questions. I got to hear them on my ride over, and I share a lot of your concerns and a lot of your questions, actually, for this process. It is not something I was familiar with before we started. I have a lot of thoughts about the CVRA and, its intent and how it's working. And I concur with what Councilmember Mullen said. Oh my gosh, you shared an entire monologue of what has been running through my head. I really want to hear from all my colleagues too, though, as we deliberate on this, because I'm still uncomfortable with it. And I do think one thing's important, because we are talking about districts, and I just want to let the public know, no matter what happens, I will continue to represent Burbank, not a fraction of Burbank, because that's what I ran for.
And Councilmember Perez, it's a good point you bring, because as the city attorney told us, and we need to remind everyone, even though we might be assigned a district, but we still represent the city at large, and our decision on the dais represent the city at large, not only the district we represent. So that's a good point that you brought up, that we need to share again with the public.
that we represent the whole city, no matter what happens. And the only last thing I want to say, I know there was a caller quite at the tail end. I was running in when she called. Diana, thank you for your comment and your input. If you could do me a favor and please send me an email, I'd love to have your contact information and set up that meeting. And I appreciate it. Thank you for your concern. I'd love to connect.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Just two questions tonight. I know, shocker. Mr. Johnson, you're in the hot seat first, then Mr. City Attorney, I got one for you.
Sure.
I promise these are easy questions. So, Mr. Johnson, you have been at work on this for over 6 months, and this is an open-ended question. It seems to me that there are many iterations of 5 district maps that the City Council could choose from. In your professional opinion, do you feel that there are any other iterations of 5 district maps that we have yet to see, or do you feel that this council has a good snapshot of all the different combinations that are out there?
Well, there are always more maps, but I think that what you've had is a very wide-ranging and broad capturing of the various options. I mean, you can always move a block here, a block there, and have a different map.
Okay.
But yes, I think if you had a very good overview, thanks largely to the work of your residents to submit at least every big picture option.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. McDougall, I had just one question. Could you remind all of us, certainly remind us and the public, what is the issue that may be decided tomorrow morning in the Santa Monica case?
The primary issue in the Santa Monica case is whether or not a city that can only increase the influence of one of the protected ethnic groups must transition to districts if they cannot achieve a majority minority voting district.
Right.
So the way you prove a case is that against a city under the CVRA is to identify that there's an identifiable protected group whose voting influence is diluted because of an at-large system. And then the CVRA presumes by district is better. It's just the presumption of the law. And then we go through the factors that Mr. Johnson has gone through at every one of our hearings, where we have to look at basically geographic criteria, communities of interest, boundaries that are important so that we don't divide communities of interest. With the hope that you are remedying the dilution of voting influence. And so the issue is how much, if you cannot achieve a majority for a protected group, how much increase of influence is enough, or is that required? And that's the main issue. And the percentages for involving the groups in Santa Monica, which are the Latino voting community, are roughly the same as Burbank in terms of the type of influence that can be created.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall. And I misspoke. I did have one more procedural question, though. Could you please remind me and the public, procedurally, when we introduce an ordinance, there is a limitation on your ability for that ordinance to change from introduction to adoption. Could you just remind us about the limitations in place there?
The council has very broad discretion to make revisions to an ordinance that's been introduced. It needs to maintain its primary purpose and scope. The words may be slightly different in the charter because I didn't have it up in front of me. But provided the primary purpose and scope remains intact, you can make revisions consistent with that before adoption. But the purpose is really that you're not doing a gut and amend, is a statewide term that we're used to hearing, where you repurpose one piece of legislation for another and the public doesn't have notice. Because the two-step process in approving an ordinance is really so that the public has an opportunity to see it, get notice before it becomes effective.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McDougall. We're kind of taking deliberation a little.
Well, yeah, let's do this. Public comment is over, so I will close the public comment periods. Let's do that. Okay. This is a public hearing, so we need to ask our questions first. Once we're done asking questions, then we'll move on to deliberation. However, my son is ranking up in Scouts today, so I actually have to leave. This was not on the calendar before we scheduled this meeting. But I do leave you in the capable hands of our vice mayor, so I'm going to pass you the gavel. And while I do so, I will ask my one question of our consultant, and then I'll leave you to it. My question is this. Map 130 keeps the original design and also keeps District 2 crossing the 5 at Winona, Cohasset, Buena Vista, and Empire, all in its same boundaries there. Any other iteration of the map does not allow for more than 2 crossings of the 5. So according to slide 1, 2, 3, our third slide, the top priority for California criteria for cities is to make it geographically contiguous. So I'm referring to map 130, the original map 130 that we started with. Having 4 crossings of the 5 versus any other iteration that only allows 2 crossings of the 5 in any of the other districts, would map the original 130, or 130A as we call it, would that not hit the top priority of the California criteria for cities the most? In your opinion, having the most crossings of that basically wall of freeway, would that not facilitate number 1 the most?
So in terms of the definition of contiguity, it's simply do they touch? And so they touch.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue of access, and as many of you have discussed before, the ability to precinct walk and connect the voters and all that, that's a policy issue, but it doesn't tie into the actual legal requirement.
I got you. Okay.
But it could be one of their findings, that they felt increased crossings were important for that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's an excellent policy point. It's not a one map violates the first.
Sure. But if we were to find a policy finding that on the ground door knocking canvassing is a benefit to contiguous space, 4 crossings versus 2 would be a better finding for us on that end.
It's your choice whether it's better
Okay.
or not. It is a finding that
All right.
we will put in if it's one of your findings.
All right, I will leave you at that. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thanks, sir.
All right, take us on. All right, have a good day, everyone.
All right, thank you, colleagues. And thank you. The mayor will note that he's leaving the meeting now. Colleagues, I think it's usually best for the chair to wait, but I did have a comment that I thought could be beneficial to the conversation, so if you'll indulge me. First, I want to thank all of the commenters, those in person, those who called in. Really appreciate your perspective. I know Mr. Ottobelli just left the room, so he'll have to watch it back later. I agree with all the comments that were made except for one. I have not made my mind up in this decision. I am still very much listening to the public. I may or may not support districts, and I'm going to continue to gather information and wait until the last possible moment to make that decision. With that said, it seems to me that we are not in a position to make a final determination tonight. We have a critical piece of information that will not be available to the council until tomorrow morning that could have a significant impact on our community. And I believe that we have a responsibility to exercise due diligence and to take into account all of that information. I would also note that we're not presently constituted as a complete council, and this is too significant of a decision to make without 5 votes. What I would say, though, and then I will be done because I really want to turn it over to all of you, is that in the interest of staff resources and time and work, I feel that we have what we are missing is a piece of legal precedence guiding principle from the California Supreme Court. I don't know that there is significantly more work that staff can provide or even the consultant can provide in different combination of maps. Therefore, I would have personally no objection with them proceeding and beginning the work of stage 2, looking at other iterations, including a 6 or 7 district map and exploring those topics. I believe we need save one critical question, and that is exactly what the city attorney put on the record tonight. So for this council member's perspective, I am not comfortable introducing an ordinance, and I think that we should exercise due diligence. With that, colleagues, I'll recognize whoever would like to speak next. Councilmember Takahashi.
Thank you for setting that up. To follow up that question is, if we did not adopt the first step of the ordinance tonight, what would be a potential, and notwithstanding what happens tomorrow morning, but just like what would be our potential choices for moving forward? Would we have to continue on with, let's just say for the sake of argument, that we are going to continue through the process of districting, and we did not do the ordinance tonight, what would be the next steps?
Well, we've been outside the safe harbor for probably 4 months. So that's the most significant. We don't know, and today, the law is the same as it was when the lawsuit was threatened, okay? So none of that changes. That doesn't change unless and until either the law changes or council adopts a map. So the advice I've given you before is the same. Hopefully tomorrow morning, we will have greater certainty under the law, under the Santa Monica case, and it's just too soon to say. So we will not be in safe harbor until a map is adopted.
Follow up to that, is it possible to to decide which is our final map tonight, to say, okay, we're done slicing and dicing the maps, we've selected the map, but not introduce the ordinance just yet, just to say, this is the map we're going to hang our hat on for now, and then we're going to hold off on the ordinance. Is that possible?
Yes, you could give staff direction to bring this ordinance back with this map for introduction at a later date.
I would like to submit that for consideration for our council. Thank you for all who spoke tonight, by the way, and those who, really want to thank those who have been here from the beginning and show up every time and call in and email us. I really appreciate that engagement. Somebody asked, I just wanted to clarify this, and I know that we've answered this many times, but I just want to make sure it's really clear. Briefly, why did we do the mapping first? Just to reiterate that. Why did we do the mapping first before we got the okay? I know we said it before, but I just want to clarify. Before we got the okay of whether to go to districts, just briefly. Mapping first and not asking the community whether we want to go to districts or not. I know you said it before, but I just want to clarify that.
So we received a lawsuit challenging the city's at-large election.
Right.
45 days after that complaint, we're vulnerable to lawsuit under the CVRA. So that's why the council had so by adopting the resolution initiating the process to consider districts, the council went back into safe harbor.
Right.
For 90 days. That safe harbor could have been extended, it was not. But we initiated the process, and I'll have Mr. Johnson go into more specific detail, but the process has a minimum number of hearings, and those first 2 hearings must be without maps to collect information about what is important to the community in drawing maps, and then the remaining 3 hearings were about the maps. So the question was taken away from the public in order to get into the safe harbor, because each city who has been sued, whether they settled that lawsuit or not, it cost them at minimum several $100,000. And cities like Santa Monica is the one with the highest fees we're aware of. We believe their fees exceed $8 million to date. To get, probably, it was $8 million before they argued before the Supreme Court. So that number could easily be 9 by the time that opinion is rolled out tomorrow morning. And so that was really the issue. Most agencies, like the school district, just went to districts. They've already adopted all their ordinances. And at least 5 other communities, since this process was initiated in Burbank, have initiated the process to go to districts. Some of them have completed the process, like the school district.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add to that, we need the 5 hearings. The other piece that comes with all this of staying in this timeline is the council and the residents maintain control of drawing the lines. If you don't start the process and you get sued, then the plaintiff and the judge then play a role in controlling the lines.
Great, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that I know we've answered that question many times, but it's confusing, and so I wanted to just clarify for the public. And it does look like we put the cart before the horse, but it's the way that the process works, and we have to do it in this order in order to comply with the law. So I just want to make that clear. And then one person asked, what happens if, let's say we adopt the map in the districts, and what happens if nobody runs in that district? There's nobody who puts their name in the hat. Have you experienced that before in any of the cities that have had districts, and what happens then?
So while he walks up, I'll tell you that's a vacancy, and it would be handled by the vacancy provision in the charter.
Okay.
Yeah, cities, we haven't really seen that happen where, we have had people, occasionally some small ones where no one runs, but then someone applies to fill the vacancy. It's only in one very small school district where we're having a problem of no one even wanted to be appointed. So that's a big deal. But yes, typically it's someone's willing at least to be appointed.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Moving on to the ranked choice voting portion. Those are, by the way, these are two separate decisions we're making tonight, correct? One is the ordinance for the maps, and we could potentially pull out the map and do that kind of sort of separately. And then the second thing is the ranked choice. So we could have two separate, we're going to have two separate votes on that, correct?
Yes, and we brought the ranked choice voting resolution because the county indicated it could initiate a process.
Right.
And might do so if requested. And there seemed to be enough interest from the council, giving the city clerk direction to go get information from the county register, that we brought that for your consideration.
Great.
As really the first volley in making that option available.
Perfect. Just want to clarify that they were separate. I wanted to ask a follow-up question. Has any other city in LA County yet done a proclamation like this yet for the county to look into ranked choice? Are we the first ones?
So you'd be the first one doing a resolution like this.
Yeah.
There's the Redondo Beach situation where they voted to switch to ranked choice voting, but they run their own elections and they're not consolidated, and it's going to be.
But they did not make a formal request to the county to change the countywide. They just did it on their own without communicating or without making a request to the county.
Correct, because the county doesn't run their elections.
Right. Okay. Great. Yeah. Okay. Just want to clarify that. But potentially, if we were to do this first, other cities could then also draft the same letter and then send it to the county and so on and so forth.
I'm sure the advocates that you've heard from will take this and go to other cities very quickly.
Okay. That's good to know. Let's see. And then that's actually it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mullins.
Thank you. Here's my thought before we look at the resolution for ranked choice voting. I would like to have, and if council agrees, of course, a full, complete understanding what that means for our city and how is that going to change, even further change our election process? Because I think we're having too many things happening at the same time. We're talking about districts, we're talking about ranked choice voting, and the public is already confused with the district to begin with. So I'm not ready to adopt a resolution to ask the county until we have a full understanding what's that going to mean. I know it's been talked about here in the meeting and some speakers came up, and I know there's special interest to get us moving into that direction. So that's another area where I want to make sure that before we send anything to the county, what is that going to mean for the city of Burbank and how is that going to change our voting process if the county actually decides that they can move forward with the city of Burbank in a consolidated election to have this system. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Perez, any thoughts? This is deliberation. All, Councilmember Takahashi, please.
Right. I wasn't sure if we were in deliberation yet. Yes. So let's, if I may, Mr. Vice Mayor, can I recommend that we tackle the ranked choice voting resolution first and then move on to the ordinance, or would you?
If there's a consensus of the council, it seems like that might be the easier issue to tackle first, and I don't see any reason we can't have two separate motions. They are two related but separate items, so why don't we do that? Councilmember Takahashi, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. To the point about the ranked choice, and I agree that there's a lot to know about ranked choice voting, and there's so many things to understand. This resolution would not actually instigate any actual action on the part of changing the election or anything like that. It would just let the county know that we are interested in them beginning the process of bringing ranked choice voting to the county. And then even if the county does do that, it would not affect Burbank until we adopted some sort of change. So I understand what you're saying, but I also would like to argue that it wouldn't actually change anything in Burbank. If we did adopt this resolution, it would not affect this whole districting process one bit. It would actually take a while before anything would even impact our city. So I think this resolution is more of a position paper and more of a indication that we're interested in having more options that we can consider rather than an actual action that we're acting on in our city right now. It's more of a position paper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please. Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Well, gee, I just
No, don't
promoted
promote me
you.
yet. No, you got a few more months.
That's what you get for leaving early.
I know,
you
right?
get the job.
Councilmember Mullins, you have the floor.
I'm fully aware of that, Councilmember Takahashi. As you know, I've conducted like 13, 14 elections here for the city of Burbank. So I understand this is not going to happen overnight, but I think before I'm actually asking the county to start looking and doing a lot of work for us on our behalf to dig in to see if they can or can't do it, we need to really have an understanding what that means for Burbank and the type of the process and how is that going to affect Burbank. I mean, we did ask for the letter. I know the city clerk provided us a letter from the county saying, no, we currently don't have it, but that was kind of a request versus adopting an actual resolution. Once you take an action, they have to actually take it to the county supervisors. They have to take it to Dean Logan and ask if this is possible or not. So I don't want to put them through all this work unless we have full understanding first. What does that mean for Burbank? And maybe once we all hear it and we hear from the public, maybe this is not something we want here in Burbank. I know I haven't seen an overwhelming amount of emails or people coming up to the podium asking for this. It has been from maybe one or two individuals, and that's why it concerns me, because that tells me two things. Either our voters don't want it, or two, they don't understand what it means, and only special individuals that really have interest in us moving into that direction. So before I move forward and adopt a resolution, I did notice that it was on the report, and I was a bit concerned about it before we actually had enough discussion to understand it. So that was the only reason I mentioned that. But thank you.
It's a valid point. I think it's a valid point. Again, though, I'd like to just reiterate that there's no action that would be taken by the county if we did write this letter. They would not be making them make an action. They could choose to ignore us for as long as they want. It's more of just letting them know, if we choose to do it, it's just letting them know that's our position to say, if we so believe this to be, that we are looking at more options for our city, and we'd like, because just so you know, I have done a lot of research on ranked choice voting, so I have my own personal opinion, which is why I've been involved with this. But I also know from the statewide election law that every jurisdiction that has elections has to have the knowledge of whether or not they can have the capacity of doing ranked choice voting. And so the fact that that isn't even documented anywhere, I think it's just important if we know and to move forward with the capacity. That's just my point of view. If the county does not agree, they always can just ignore until we get a number of other cities who agree with us. But I don't think that we're putting, at this point, I don't think the letter will be putting any undue pressure on the county. It'd just be more letting them know that it's an area that we can begin the process to take a look at it. So that's just why I think it's important to bring it up. But again, I would love to hear more thoughts of the other half of the council over there.
Thank you.
Yeah, to Councilmember Mullins' point, you brought up a great point. This is on a report, and we didn't really receive a lot of information on ranked choice voting in the report itself. So more than making a point, I have a question to staff and our demographer. Is there anything they'd like to share about how it would specifically affect us here in Burbank? Is there anything that separates us from other cities, et cetera?
Sure. I think one of the key points, this might help. You heard from Mr. Cheston, who called in earlier, talking about he will work with the city to make sure that the county looks at the right kind of ranked choice. There are various versions of ranked choice voting, and so one of the reasons behind this resolution, I think, is that we don't want to go through a path and the city decides it really likes version X, and then the county says, well, you can only have version Y. So this is kind of, it's hard for us to proceed very far in terms of what would be involved in implementing and the changes until we know what the county will be able to handle. And their process, developing their current voting system took 9 years. We have had some calls from Fair Vote and others time, but there are ways to fast track this change. And the county has also said one of the things they're waiting for is actually state legislation. So this is not something that's going to happen in months or even just a couple of years. So it'll be a long process. But I think this resolution is helping us get to the information that then would come back, and the council may say, and the city may say, okay, what the county's implemented is not something we're interested in. So I think that's the idea. This is more of the information gathering really is reliant on the county coming back to us with information.
So it is just as meaningful to me if we get a 4-0 vote that the council wishes not to adopt a resolution to pursue ranked choice voting. I will take either decision and put it in my file.
Thank you, Mr. City
So
Attorney.
move.
Councilmember Perez, you still have the floor. Any other questions or comments?
I mean, not so much questions. I have a lot of answers and a lot of non-answers, because I agree with your earlier comments that I would like to see other iterations. There was one caller who called in and asked about 6 districts and said, this might get you to more equity and things that you want to see. I don't know what he meant. I haven't seen his map yet. He said he emailed us. Thank you.
For the record, I'm handing the map to Councilmember Perez.
But I think, I'd love to take time with that. It's very difficult to think, oh, we're adopting this map. But wait, there's more. Next time you can introduce 6 districts, 7 districts, 12 districts, and also an independent mayor. And also, it just gets very convoluted, and this part at least feels like a cart before the horse situation. And I don't know that we have to do this in particular, right? I'd like to know our other options.
Just on the numbers the resident was citing, the resident was citing total population numbers, and not what's the important part for the Voting Rights Act is the citizen voting age population, because that's your eligible voters. So it's not that 6 districts will get you a majority of Latino seat and 5 won't. It's that he's just looking at the total population numbers where you can get there. Even with 6 districts, you're not going to be anywhere close to 50% of the eligible voters are Latino.
And let me say that the reason why you have a 5-district map in front of you is not because you all preferred a 5-district map. It's because a 5-district map is the only map that could be adopted without a full charter amendment. And the only way to fall within safe harbor under the CVRA is to adopt a map. And the quickest way to do that is adopt a map that doesn't require a charter amendment. So we're kind of boxed in because this whole process, to Councilmember Takahashi's point, started from a threat of litigation, which meant council was adopting resos before they went to the public. And so that's why we're not looking at 6 or some other number.
So, Mr. City Attorney, I'm going to thank you for that explanation. Just for the sake of our conversation, we did talk about ranked choice voting first, so just to keep us on point there, I will weigh in, and I offer this as maybe some guidance to the community that we can and do change our minds. Coming into tonight, I actually agreed with you, Councilmember Takahashi. I don't see any issue with saying we have an interest with it, with all due respect. However, there are different models of ranked choice voting, and I don't think we've fully explored that. And I don't think, since we will really be novel and the first of its kind in LA County, I think we can even set the stage and say preferred ranked choice voting is the best of ranked choice voting models, or whatever model we want to go after. So I would actually be in favor of bringing it back with a bit more information, but ultimately I would support a resolution. I think this is something we should do to really lead in this area. And I also know it's something that you've been really knowledgeable and passionate about, Councilmember Takahashi. I'm just thinking, if we're going to do it, let's be really specific and say, yes, we want ranked choice voting, and we really want this model because it's the best version. Or to be more fair, we should say we would be interested in having the option of whatever model of ranked choice voting and exploring that as a possibility for Burbank. So it seems like we have a consensus to table it.
I agree. Look, I appreciate years of experience and then also conducting 13 elections and knowing the complex of running an election. And I think we just have too much right now on the table. Again, we can definitely look into this in the future once we're done with what we have before us. You know, again, tomorrow we might find out some great news. We might not find some great news. And in the county of Los Angeles, the county, as we talked earlier about spending almost 9 years for VSAP system in many classes that we attended, many input from all the county of Los Angeles, 88 cities, plus, you know, I think there are 88 cities, still 88 cities in the county. So I don't want to jump into it because one caller or two people have been really been asking us to look into it. So I'm not ready to make that move to ask the county to do anything because it's just going to be more complicated for us, especially that we're dealing with districts. So I am not comfortable making a decision, even a request to the county right now. I don't want to add one more thing to the voters to worry about what is it that we're doing now, because as it is, they're concerned about what we're doing, even though we've been talking about it for 6 months. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Follow-up.
Mr. Vice Mayor. Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So what I would ask is if the council can give specific direction on how long we can wait. So because I need clarity of purpose. We're going to have a decision tomorrow, and the council's going to give us direction in September when we come back. And so if we want to separate the ranked choice voting, depending upon what the council's direction is, it would be great for clarity of purpose to push off further consideration following the March 2024, because I could foresee this issue popping up in September, October, November if we're looking at a charter amendment under phase 2, and it will confuse and complicate our effort to bring back council's direction. Or we could wait until after whatever it is we do between now and November 2024, that we could then resume this discussion. But given that there's more than one option, I don't know if there's 3 options or 6 options or how much consideration the council will want. But in order for us to focus on meaningful analysis, it would be helpful for us to separate by time after either March 2024 or November 2024. So if the council can give us that kind of direction, it would help, so that when people come up and say you haven't looked at ranked choice voting, we at least have the intention of the council on when they want to consider it.
Right. Yeah, okay. So I agree that there is a lot to consider for ranked choice voting, and that can kind of muddy the water and being confusing. I also think that the fact that there's so much choice in ranked choice voting, that I don't think we as a city at this point, or even really in the near future, would be equipped to even consider all the different options. Like we said earlier, I really think the county is the one who's responsible for being able to change their systems or not. And they have told us directly that they will not even consider changing their systems to ranked choice until they get a request from the city that we're interested in something. And so we can put a lot of effort into looking at all the different ways of ranked choice voting, but if the county says that we can only do these 2 kinds, then we've basically put a lot of effort into something that's down the road, it's not going to make any difference in our city. However, if we say, hey, we're interested in ranked choice, what can you do? Then they start the process at the county and they come back with these 2 different options. Then we can then look at those options in depth and decide as a city whether we would like to do those options. And the process itself takes a really long time. So if we make a request now, it won't be until probably 3, 4, 5 years before we even see them come back with an option of what we can even do. So us waiting to do this reso is actually going to be more of a, how do I put this? We could even create more work for ourselves Because what we're doing is we're asking for us to do the research into ranked choice first, rather than saying, hey, LA County, please do the research on what we can do. Other counties have done ranked choice, right? How did they go about deciding? Was it the county first and then the states, the cities? How was their process? Monterey County, I want to say, or?
So with San Francisco and Alameda are the two. San Francisco, I believe, was first, and they're the city and county. So it made life very easy because there's only one city and it's the whole county. So they went, and then Alameda followed. It was all charter cities first, and they actually started writing the rules in. I don't know the exact details. Obviously, there are folks from up there who were involved who are happy to talk about that. But yes, it was the city and county of San Francisco went first, and it's evolved. At first, you could only rank 3, which was kind of a mess. But now San Francisco again led, and they developed a system where you can rank, I think, 10 or 15 candidates now.
Right.
So yeah, it was those 2 counties, and they went first.
So maybe the wording in this is not making it clear, but at least from my perspective, what I see this as is a ask to the county, please start looking into ranked choice so that we in the future can have this option to do. We are not telling the county how to do ranked choice, which ranked choice we want, because honestly, I think that we don't have the capacity, any city really doesn't have the capacity to have that, because we're not running our own elections. But the county needs to know what they can do. So anyway, I see this more as an ask for them to provide us more options, not necessarily for us to decide we want ranked choice, now county do it for us. So I think that actually would be a much bigger ask. But I see where you're coming from about making things challenging and difficult, and I am willing to push it for consideration to discuss more, but I am not a supporter of looking into all the different ways to do ranked choice and coming up with our own version, because I just don't think we're equipped to do that as a city, to understand that enough to be able to know what the county is capable of doing.
Again, Mr. Mayor. I liked saying it.
I'm not going to give you any brownie points, but I appreciate the effort, by all means.
I don't know. I'm getting permission from you, so it's just natural, right? Completely agree that I just want to clarify, I was not trying to say which model we want to use, because heck, there's so many models, we don't even know if what one of the models. What I wanted to do is at some point in the future, and I agree with the city attorney, that perhaps what we do is like, okay, well, let's take a look after the 2024 election, for example, and let's present what models are out there. So when we're educating ourselves in the event, and also the public, so they can hear, what does that mean? What does ranked choice mean? I guarantee you there's a lot of people who have no clue what it means. So we can have focus, maybe a study session. I love those study sessions. I'm not recommending that. But we can have focused discussion on the different types, and then start educating our public to get used to the idea and listening to it. So for right now, I really want our effort to be focused on the districting, what we're doing, and then in 2024, if everybody's in agreement after November, then we say, okay, Mr. City Attorney, bring us some information. And who knows, by then the county may have enough pressure from other cities, or the state might have to come up and say that's what LA County is doing.
And I have a burning question for you, Councilmember Mullins, because I see you as the expert in this scenario. Have you had experience with this in the past? I think you made a great point when you asked how many residents are coming up and asking for this. Has there been discussion in the past around ranked choice voting?
And this is the exact truth. I've had maybe 2 people in the 10 years I have been in the city clerk's office. They come up about every election. They question if we ever looked into it. And I probably can dig back the emails that I sent from the county, from the individuals, and let them know, no, this is not happening here. It's happened up north. LA County is not ready, especially that they spent millions of dollars on their VSAP system. So I did. 2 individuals, I can't recall their names, but they've always come up during an election.
Thank you.
One of those names is me.
So,
Maybe it was her twice.
So, Council, it would seem to me that we have a consensus to maybe bring this item back for more discussion, more study, and bringing back the resolution. I would suggest we could even do it after March 2024. If we're going to put a charter amendment on, that would be in March. So as soon as April of next year, we could do that. And I think that gives staff a little time to work with it. So if that's a consensus, if we can just get a motion, we'll take a vote on that issue and then tackle the map issue.
Do you want me to make a
Anyone can do
motion?
it. It shouldn't be me.
Okay, she's not making the motion. Well, I make a motion to table this item for today and bring it back after the March 2024 election. Do we need to have a specific date for you, Mr. City Attorney?
No, it might not even be me that brings it back.
Okay.
But we just,
Are you
this is
going
helpful.
anywhere that I'm not aware of?
No, but between the city clerk who runs elections and my
Okay,
office,
all right.
we'll need to figure out,
Who's-
who's
okay.
the best. And as you indicated, neither one of us is the knowledgeable party to bring this information. So we'll be hunting for the right source.
Great. Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, can we take a vote? Unless there's any other discussion, I should ask. Nope. Vote, please.
Councilmember Mullins?
Yes.
Councilmember Perez?
Yes.
Councilmember Takahashi?
As this would be just a statement of position and not actually put any work into the process of districting or any other voting process, I am not in favor of tabling it. I would have voted yes to the resolution tonight, so I'm going to vote no. No on tabling it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Schultz?
Yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
And now to the other item on the agenda. Who would like to begin that discussion? Well, I think I've made my position clear. I'm happy to say it again, but I'd be supportive of a motion to continue even to the next, even to September 12th, to the very next city council meeting. But it sounds like the state of the law may or may not, but may change in about 16 hours. And so I would much rather have that information at hand. And I would argue that there is certainly a valid city interest, an interest in the public in using our due diligence. And I will also make one other mention. Yes, as it's been said several times, we are outside of state safe harbor, and that won't necessarily change tomorrow or the next day. So with that, I'd love to hear from all of you.
I agree with you. I think we have been very transparent in the discussion and the public hearings and putting maps together. So I'm ready if anybody wants to challenge our process, because we have done our due diligence. We have been sitting here talking about it and reaching out. So I would love to wait and hear what happens tomorrow. So if the item can be placed on the agenda in September, maybe not discuss it in length, because we probably have a long agenda on the 12th, but maybe as a result of what the lawsuit or the results of tomorrow's outcome, to hear about it on the 12th, and that kind of guides us to the next step, what we all need to do as a next step.
Thank you. And I will give the floor back to you, but to the city attorney, just a procedural question. If the council's not asking for any additional mapping or workup, if we're just essentially asking for information to come back, the result of the Santa Monica case, could that be put on the September 12th agenda as a report item as opposed to a public hearing?
Yes, this would be a report, and Mr. Johnson can address more specifically, but the hearing is required for the adoption of a map, and this would not be, unless you're requesting adoption of a map, it could just be a regularly agendized report.
Okay.
I would just add to that the challenge in terms of agenda time and how much time it'll take on the 12th is if you're ready to choose your preferred map tonight, that would greatly limit the time it'll take on the 12th. If you still have 5 maps on the table, you'll bring people in to debate amongst the 5 maps in addition to the bigger issue. So if you're ready to pick a map, that'll limit how much time it takes on the 12th.
Takahashi.
Mr. Johnson, to follow up with that, so if we choose a map tonight, and Mr. City Attorney, if we choose a map tonight, if we get to one, on the September 12th meeting, if we have that map, would we have to have a public hearing then to adopt an ordinance? Is the map itself what we need the public hearing for, or is it to adopt the ordinance that we need a public hearing for?
The ordinance is the official action, so you need the hearing on the ordinance.
Okay.
If you pick a map tonight, you're greatly limiting the debate, people know, but you're not actually adopting it until you adopt that ordinance.
Okay. So, Mr. Vice Mayor, I think it would be good to focus on, if we can, to get to a map tonight. But although we are missing the mayor, so I'm not 100% comfortable with doing that without him here. I don't know. But I think that, I would like to ask the city attorney if we have to add another public hearing in order to adopt an ordinance. Is that going to be, what are your thoughts on that process?
Do we need the hearing to introduce the ordinance? Just adoption of the ordinance?
Just adoption.
Okay.
Okay.
So we could bring an ordinance with the map you choose tonight, and you would introduce it. If the council wanted to change the map, we have whether the map is published, but all of these maps have been published.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even if they pick a different map to introduce, as long as they don't add new maps, they've still been published.
Correct. You could actually go back and pull, map 101 if you wanted to, because they're all published. But that's the idea, is to make clear this is the map. So, yeah, it's not a binding decision until you adopt the ordinance.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. City Attorney, did you have another comment?
I wasn't sure if you needed me to talk anymore.
Oh, well, it's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts, but entirely up to you, sir. Otherwise, it goes back to Councilmember Takahashi.
No, I agree that I am not comfortable tonight making any decisions on this ordinance until I really would like to hear the results of the case as well, the Santa Monica case as well. And it's tomorrow. It's too bad it wasn't this morning. It's tomorrow morning. So I just want to make sure that as we're pushing it forward, we're not putting our city at risk, or we're making ourselves do another late night of undue work, or what we're putting ourselves into by pushing it back. So it sounds like, though, we're adding an item on the agenda and not any additional public hearings, because we'd have to have a public hearing at the end anyway to adopt the ordinance finally, right? So this is just another opportunity to look at it on the agenda.
Right. We would have sufficient time. If the next meeting had to be a hearing, we would have you continue this hearing to that date, because we don't have time to actually publish a hearing with our notice provisions by that date. But we will have time to introduce an ordinance and then meet the notice requirements for later adoption of that ordinance, keeping in mind we have 4 actions, 2 actions on 2 different ordinances to do to sew this all up just for 5 districts. 2 actions on map, 2 actions on fixing the code to reference districts instead of at large.
And I would just add, keep in mind, even if it's not a formal public hearing, there's still a public comment period.
Yes.
So,
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mullins.
Thank you. To the city attorney, or Mr. Johnson, at what point, if council wishes to give directions to take this out to the voters, for example, on the March 24th election, at what point do we discuss this, and would it be in a separate ordinance to be introduced instead of us just adopting it and it becomes the final law for us that we just adopted districts? But what if we want to maybe discuss taking this out to the voters?
I would be happy if the council gave me direction to bring an ordinance to put a map 130 on the ballot, because it would put the issue, but I don't know if you want a phase 2. We're actually running out of time. Mr. Johnson wants to deliver phase 2, and this analysis that we're doing is, there's only so much time between now and mid-November when we have to have all the work sewn up for the council to do its final action on December 5th or 8th. I can't remember. I think 5th is our meeting.
December 8th, but there's a tentative calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a calendar in here for phase 2. So the point is, at this point, if the council were introducing an ordinance and we knew adoption was certain in September, we barely have 6 weeks, which means we're not going to have time for the council's customary preferred community outreach for a charter amendment.
The other thing to keep in mind with putting it on the ballot is no problem with putting one question on the ballot. what we've seen in other cities is if you put, do you want 5 districts on the ballot or do you want 6 districts on the ballot, they both go down. Because if you have, say, 60% of people want districts, 30% vote yes on one and no on the other, and then they both go down.
May
Yes,
I
Councilmember
ask a
Mullins.
question? My thought was not to ask the public in March if you want 6 or 5. My thought, if you want districts, period, instead of at-large election. And I understand that even if they said no, we can still be sued. But at that time, we can also come back and we can adopt the ordinance ourselves. I want part of my thought about doing this is this really, again, would be more of an educational. We heard from the public earlier about, well, the people don't know what's going on. So my thought is to take this from at-large to district election and put it on the ballot and let the voters decide, because that's still part of the process. Council can either adopt an ordinance and just call it, and we are having districts, or we can take it out to the voters to have them express, what their wishes are.
So at this point, we're speculating. We really need to know what the Supreme Court's decision is
Right.
before we can speculate anymore. Because as of right now, today, we're no longer in a safe harbor, and putting the question on the March ballot does not give us any safe harbor. So that question could change tomorrow morning, and we simply can't answer that, so that we're now at the point of just speculating. So should the council direct it, we'll bring this item back on the 12th with an understanding of our obligations post-Santa Monica decision, and we'll have better direction. Our intention as of tonight is to bring this ordinance with map 130 and its iterations and the analysis from Santa Monica, so that should the council need to act, the council will be able to act, and then we'll know what the follow-up decisions are.
And Mr. City Attorney, not to put too fine a point on it, but it looks like, tell me if you disagree. But we have our next meeting 3 weeks from yesterday, September 12th, and provided the council made some determination at that point, are we going to do a phase 2 or not, for example, that would really be our last opportunity to make that determination so that there's sufficient time to do phase 2. Is that, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, that seems to be what you and Mr. Johnson are suggesting, that September 12th really needs to be the date of which direction are we going?
We'll know better then, because again, our legal obligations may change.
Very good.
So, yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. Okay. I prefer not to make motions as chair. I can, but I think it's cleaner for the record if I don't.
Can we just roll back the tape to what city attorney said, and I want to make the motion of what he said?
You just say ditto Mr. McDougal.
Ditto,
and-
Mr. McDougal. I'll make the
Bring
motion.
back the report.
So what I said was we will bring this item back as a report to council on September 12th.
Yes.
With the proposed ordinance and the same maps.
Yes.
And first, detail what happened, what the Supreme Court said.
Yes.
And then let you know whether it changed anything, and we'll have a staff recommendation.
I would like to make that motion, please.
Okay, and was that a second, Councilmember Mullins?
Yes.
Great. Any other discussion? Nope. Can we take a vote?
Councilmember Mullins?
Yes.
Councilmember Perez?
Yes.
Councilmember Takahashi?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schultz?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Because this is a special meeting agenda, we don't typically have our end of council reporting or action items. So with that, we now adjourn the meeting to Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 for a joint city council meeting in the council chamber located at 275 East Olive Avenue, the second floor. The public may view the meeting online or on television and will be able to provide public comment in the following 4 ways. First, in person for general public comment, public hearings, and reports to council. Second, by calling in directly to the council meeting at 818-238-3335 to speak during the general public comment period and public hearing items only. Third, by leaving an e-comment on the city webpage, burbankca.gov/e-comments. And fourth, by emailing the Burbank City Council directly at citycouncil@burbankca.gov. Thank you all. Have a good night. See you September